Leadership is not just simply reflecting people's darkest fears back at them like has been done for the last decade or two. It's actually inspiring people to a better future. It's been this, QAnon, stolen election, garbage that is reflected back to people, and we're paralyzed to criticize it because, gosh, we got to have those votes for the next election. But I have to start asking people, the next election for what? So that we can be in office and peddle conspiracy theories again? So that we have to be beholden to Proud Boys? No. You know what? The Proud Boys, the QAnons, they can leave. And if it costs us an election, great.
Well, he said it. Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger says it's time to purge the party of far-right extremists, even if it means losing elections. But with Republican leaders largely silent amid a steady stream of revelations about extremist lawmakers like Marjorie Taylor Greene and the majority of the GOP Senate voting against even holding a trial for Donald Trump, can the party be saved, and should it be? Joining us now, former Republican Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee. I have wanted to talk to you since you first showed up at an event in your state and said that, and it looked like it pained you to say it, that Donald Trump hadn't yet displayed the fitness for the office he held. What did you mean then, and did you see this coming?
Well, it's good to be with you, Nicole. I took a 2-year sabbatical after leaving the Senate 2 years ago, January 3rd, and except I did step back out after this election, and it's good to be with you. Look, I'm in a turn the page mode. Okay, we've been through all that we've been through, and as Adam was mentioning earlier, I really think we've got to start focusing on policy issues and moving ahead. As you know, having served in a White House, when you have the leader of a party being a certain way, the party unfortunately can adopt that way, and that's no longer the case. The standard bearer for the Democrats is President Joe Biden, but the Republicans don't have one. And so it's time for us to have a debate about who we really are and start talking about policy issues instead of reliving things that aren't true, conspiracy theories. It is amazing to me how many people believe these things. I still cannot believe it. I have friends who are hardworking, thoughtful people that believe some of the things that have been put out. But hopefully, as we move away, we'll get back to a place that you recognize and I recognize that is talking about where we're going to go as a country. And without a standard bearer, that means there's going to be a debate.
Well, I was in the White House, and I was in the White House the last time the nation's capital area was attacked with a terrorist attack when the terrorists flew planes into the Pentagon. And I guess if I could just push you, how do you do counterterror policy with a member in the GOP caucus who doesn't believe in that attack or this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's that's probably that person's probably not too influenceable. And I don't know that person. That person's not so far from here. Well, I live in Chattanooga and not far down the road. But look, I think when people over time, people marginalize themselves by saying things that are just too crazy to believe, the world is flat or whatever. And I guess there are some people who still believe that. But look, they marginalize themselves. And the party moves on to more thoughtful people who are actually talking about real issues that the American people need to be dealing with.
Do you think that the effort to punish
We're not quite there. Go ahead. What's that?
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, I mean, people like Liz Cheney, there's a legitimate and robust policy debate to be had with Liz Cheney if you're a Democrat and you disagree with her foreign policy views. But the Republicans are looking at punishing her for her votes and her statements. That doesn't seem like turning the page from the Trump era.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And, there are some people that are going to hang on as, showing as much fealty as they can to try to garner whatever wind at the back they think they may have by having favor by our former president. But I think that dissipates over time. I really hope that it does. I know y'all were talking earlier about Senator McConnell. Actually, I've been heartened by the things that have been said recently in defense of of Liz Cheney, John Barrasso doing the same thing. And the fact is that those are tough votes to make for people. And, they take courage to make. And, everybody has to form their own opinion about what to do. But we don't march in lockstep. You remember, President Bush, some people disagreed with what he was doing, but they weren't outcasts. They weren't thrown out of the party for not following him lockstep. I disagreed with a few things. So we've moved to a place where it's all about personality, right? It's all about a personality. We've just never been that place before. We've been about fiscal issues and leadership in the world, and we may disagree on a policy, but you're not thrown out. And it's going to take a learning. It's going to take a while for people to get there, but that's where we've got to go again as a country, because personality, worshiping personality, as we have seen, is dangerous for our country. Our democracy is more fragile than we ever anticipated. And we've got to move to a more mature understanding of what politics is about. And it's about policies. It's not about some person always being right when we know many times they were actually telling untruths.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.